All of us are getting the benefit of the questions and answers. In the past, we have the Planning Commission here. In the past, you'll be asked a different question, but considering the budgetary constraints, we are a status quo budget. If you can provide what that entails as it relates to the operations of your respective department, and just for the viewing audience, if you can provide a brief synopsis of the operations and services that you provide to the city, and the floor is yours.
Sure. My name is Bob Lehman. I'm the interim executive director at the planning department, and to my right is George Rooker. He's our chief financial officer and special projects manager. And in the back, we have Jeffrey Leach, our finance officer, and Greg Claxton, who manages our CIB process. And I'll just start off by saying that, yes, we can continue to maintain our current levels of service with the proposed status quo budget. And I think most of you are familiar with the planning department. We see the council on a regular basis, and I will, for the viewing audience, I'll walk you through what our department consists of, the different divisions, and kind of what we're working on. We have 5 divisions within the planning department, starting with our long-range planning division, which is our community design division, and that is a really busy division right now. We're working on a possible rezoning for Music Row to find, and we've been working on this for a little while to try to find ways to maintain the cultural heritage along Music Row. And with that, we have hired consultants to do a study of transfer development rights with that. We're also working on the Donaldson Transit-Oriented Redevelopment Plan. That's an ongoing process that is going to be at the Planning Commission soon, and will be at the council soon. But that's been the first time we've had one of the new transit-oriented redevelopment districts, so that's been a learning process, and we've had a lot of input on that plan, and we hope to have that in order soon. That will be, I believe it's a public hearing here at the council on May 15th. With that, we're also looking at a Lebanon Pike community plan update, not for the same area, but for the area from downtown leading up to that transit-oriented redevelopment district at the request of Councilman Syracuse. We're going to begin working on a SoBro planning study with, we're sort of partnering with Smith G Studios, and they're going to be the applicant, but we're also going to be involved in a process of looking at updating the community plan for the SoBro area coming up. We're continuing to work on the Highland Heights community plan update. We will also be starting on an Edge Hill community plan update in the not too distant future. And urban design overlays that are underway are the downtown Jolton. That's one that's coming up. The downtown Jolton urban design overlay. Green Hills urban design overlay amendment is still something we've been looking at over the past year or so. And then the 21st, we have met with Council Lady Allen, and we have the 21st Avenue South urban design overlay that we will begin working on in the near future as well. And I've met with Council Lady Vercher about the Moss Road area, and that's a potential community plan amendment for that area as well. So, and then not to mention the fairgrounds, that's another community plan amendment and rezoning that will be headed our way in the next 6 months or so. And starting next week, actually, they're going to have a kickoff meeting next week on that. And we will be involved in that process going forward. So we are really busy from a community planning standpoint, and as you all know, we updated Nashville Next in 2015, and we haven't gone back out since then to update overall community plans, but we're sort of dealing with hot spots and using our time to look at the just smaller areas that need immediate attention versus going out and updating an overall community plan. And I think for the time being, that's what will continue to do. Eventually, we will have to get back into updating the overall community plan for each area. But with the growth that we're seeing and the growth all over the city, I think looking at hot spots is what we are doing so that we can give the most attention to the most amount of people. And then I've been the interim director since January, and in that time we've also been working with our commissioners to do a lot more training sessions and work sessions We've got 6 new commissioners out of 10 over the past year or so, and so I think that's been one of my goals, is to try to do as much training as possible to get the commissioners up to speed as much as we can, and I think that's been going well. Other areas, we have our land development division, and I think that's the division that you probably see the most up here, with zone changes and community meetings, attendance, and things like that. And we remain very busy in in the land development area. We, over the past 3 years, have seen a pretty steady amount of zone change cases. FY17 was probably the peak, and then FY18 kind of returned back to the FY16 levels, but those are still at a very high level, and they're above previous year, way above previous years. But I don't see that we're seeing a dramatic increase in the number of cases, but we're steady at a high amount. So we're very busy in land development. We also have our Division of Transportation. A lot of you know Michael Briggs. He's the manager of that division, and we work on a lot of different things, including major and collector street plan updates, sidewalk recommendations to the Board of Zoning Appeals. We assist Public Works with reviewing traffic impact studies and making recommendations on those traffic impact studies. And we assist with traffic calming and intersection prioritization programs with Public Works for that division. We're also working with Council Lady Henderson on possible tweaks to the sidewalk ordinance. We've had several meetings with Council Lady Henderson. We're going to meet with the other departments. We've met with affordable housing folks, and that process is underway to try to look at what might need some tweaks for the ordinance that was passed last year. And our goal is to have something around the 1-year mark that we could bring back to the council to update that ordinance. We also have a capital planning division, which is part of our executive office. Greg Claxton in the back manages that process, and as you know, that's a very detailed process we've ramped up over the last several years. We're trying to provide much more data, much more information to our Planning Commission and to the council with those CIB recommendations, so that we can show how to prioritize infrastructure requests so that they are in line with Nashville Next, so that we have the infrastructure in areas that are called under Nashville Next, where those areas call for more growth, like along corridors and in our centers. And so Greg's job is to help work with a lot of different departments, to bring a lot of different people together and try to coordinate all the different departments' plans and master plans, and make a logical recommendation to the commission and the council that's understandable with a lot of detailed data. And so he's been doing a really good job of ramping that program up over the last 2 years. We also have a GIS division and mapping division, which we map all the new zone changes. We map all the new plats that get recorded. We do research in our GIS division for various different departments within Metro, including the police department, fire department. They come to us with a lot of different requests and research things that are done throughout Metro, so they remain very busy as well. And so, in a nutshell, those are our different divisions and what we're working on, and I'd be glad to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you so much. Council Lady Allen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank y'all for being here and for working as hard as you do, trying to keep up with this amazing growth. Couple of questions that just arise from changes that I'm not sophisticated enough to understand. There's a $3.5 million deduction because the MPO is doing something.
Right.
Can you explain what that is?
I failed to mention that. This year we did have one big change in the budget numbers. Is the MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, used to be sort of housed in the planning department, and we were their fiscal agent. And this year that changed. The MPO moved over to the Greater Nashville Regional Council. And so even though the money shows up in our budget, we were more of a pass-through agency. We didn't have access to those funds to be able to spend, but we were there. their fiscal agent and had to sign off on the funds, the grant money and federal money that goes through to the MPO. So that is a change that appears on our budget, but it doesn't really affect the day-to-day operations of the planning department.
Great. And the Greater National Regional Council is not a Metro-funded entity, so does that sort of move that totally out of the Metro budget, or is it?
I believe that is correct.
Okay.
George might be able to answer.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you. Okay, and then you have two funds, the general fund and then special purpose fund. Can you tell me what makes some personnel be under the special purpose fund and what those jobs are?
Well, we have a special purpose fund. Out of our 50 positions, 47 of those are funded through the Metro budget, and then we have 3 grant-funded positions that we have a transportation demand management grant that we received that we get money from TDOT, and that's a program that is overseen by our transportation division, and so that's about $650,000 a year for the next 3 years, I believe, where we will be working with TDOT to sort of encourage and get the word out to different organizations and businesses throughout the county to try to find different ways for reduce the transportation, the number of cars and vehicles on the road by having ride share programs, having different work hours, staggered work hours, and educating about different ways to use transportation, the buses and things like that. So that's a program that is a grant-funded program that is in our budget for the next 3 years.
Gotcha, okay, thank you. And then there was a $200,000 direct federal increase in that special purpose fund. That's the grant you're talking about, or? I think it showed up on the personnel breakdown on page 4.
I may refer that one to George.
So under program revenue, I guess that's where it's showing up. It went from 526,000 up to 707,000.
Actually, it's a little bit less straightforward than that. Some of the money that was in the special purpose fund previously was to support the MPO. That money went away, and then we had some new money coming in for the transportation program that Bob just mentioned.
Gotcha.
And we have a couple of other smaller grants for an Our Town grant that's looking at some industrial space in Wedgwood, Houston, and there's a mapping fund that we also have that the money comes into a special purpose fund as well.
Okay, great. We appreciate y'all finding that grant money. Thank you.
Councilman Glover.
Thank you, Chair. George, I guess this is going to come to you or maybe Talia, I'm not sure. The $3.5 million on the MPO, I see the reduction in here. I don't see it reflected, and I don't have last year's book here with me, but where would that have been reflected? Because it's not reflected on any of the numbers on your planning at a glance. So just out of curiosity, are we still spending that money? Where is that? Where did it shift to?
The MPO money, our budget last year was $9.3 million. It went down to $5.9 million, and that reflects the revenue and the expenditures associated with the MPO that were transferred over to the GNRC. Talia may be able to explain the document a little bit better than I can.
Yeah, and I said that incorrectly. Where I really was asking, where did it go? Where's that money going?
In terms of the planning department really served as a fiscal agent.
Right, they explained that. Mm-hmm.
But if you look, Councilman, on page D07-6, you'll see the heading on that page shows the MPO.
Okay.
And this is specifically the MPO piece that he's showing where all of that is now going away.
Okay, but is it staying, is somebody else in Metro
No,
playing,
it's-
so it's
We no
going
longer
away
serve-
completely?
Right, it's
Okay,
gone away completely because we no
so it
longer
was
service
just pure
the-
pass-through is all
Right,
it
we were
was?
fiscal
There are
agent.
federal transportation dollars that pass through the planning department essentially for the
Okay.
use of the MPO. So when the MPO left, that money now goes to GNRC
Yeah.
for the use.
Yeah,
of
and
the
forgive me because I didn't ask the question very well when I started, but that's what I was wondering. Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Council-Lady Henderson.
Thank you, Chair Vercher. Mr. Lehman, I know the FTE reduction here is probably likewise the difference for MPO, right? So you're down at 50 FTEs now, is that correct?
That's right.
And can you speak to, I know former Director Sloan at last year's budget hearing was speaking to us of the challenges and kind of this booming market that we're having of retaining employees in public service versus going to the private sector.
Right.
Can you speak to your retention this year or any challenges that you're seeing in that regard?
Yeah, I would say we've had much better retention over the last year. I mean, I would attribute that, a lot of that, to the pay plan increases over the last 2 years. I think that got us more in line. I don't know that it's completely in line with the private sector, but I think we are more competitive now, and I think we've just had people stay longer, and I think people staying longer, it leads to a little bit less of a chaotic situation at work where people get trained and people understand their roles better, and I think overall there's a little bit more happiness of being at work. And then this is a difficult job. I mean, you have people that are dealing with stressful situations. We have a lot of deadlines, and we have lots of different competing interests and lots of people that are coming at us from different angles about what we should be doing. And overall, it's just it's a stressful position as a planner, and especially when you're not familiar with maybe the zoning code or subdivision regulations. So I would say the longer that the planners are in those positions, the more comfortable they get. And then with the pay plan increases on top of that, I think that has led to better retention.
I appreciate that, and we certainly appreciate your staff. As you mentioned earlier, we engage with them quite a lot from council. Particularly, I wanted to ask you, I know many on council were sad to see Ms. Logan, but she moved on to other great things. But I know there was not really a junior Ms. Logan. She was kind of in that special project space and addressing policy issues. Right. So can you speak to just your current staff, I mean, your planners versus those folks who are maybe engaging with council more particularly on policy issues,
That's right.
what you're looking at from your staffing mix in that regard?
Right. Well, I mean, Carrie was very uniquely qualified. I mean, she had a skill set that is hard to find, but I would say that was not an overnight thing. I mean, she was in the department for, I think, over 10 years, and that goes to the retention. I think the longer we can keep people in the planning department, the more institutional knowledge they have, the more understanding of the zoning code, the more understanding of the policies. And I think the longer people are there, the easier it is to be able to come up with solutions to problems and to be one of those project managers that can do those sorts of things. And so that's what I'm focused on, is trying to retain people and recognize people by giving promotions where they're deserved and when funds are available, and finding ways to have more continuing education where we can. I think that's a big part of being a planner, is staying up to speed with the current trends around the country and to be able to see what other cities are doing. And I think being able to provide those types of things to our staff will help to retain them. And so I think that's what I've been focused on. And so far in the past year, I think we've been more successful with that.
Great, I appreciate hearing that. Could you all not necessarily this budget year since it's status quo, and I don't know, Mr. Rooker, if that's in your space, I had posed the question to the law department about kind of their annual, membership in the bar, continuing education. I know the majority of your planners have a master's degree in planning, and with their AICP certification and otherwise, like that they have certifications they have to keep up. I know that's something we do for our folks that work in the law department. And I would like to look at going forward how we might do that for our planners as well. So if that's something that you all could quantify, and that we could kind of think of that in partnership with Human Resources in the future, I'd like to get a handle on how much that would be, because we appreciate their service. And, you know, with that advanced degree, working in public service, I would hope that we could, in time, be able to support them in that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Council Lady. Council Lady Johnson, Karen Johnson.
Thank you, Chair Vercher. Thank you, Bob and George. And George, thank you for that very clear explanation on the question that Steve Glover, Councilman Glover, asked you. We really appreciate that. You showed a lot of transparency, and it just was very understandable with your response. So thank you. And also thank you for all the work you're doing with all of the council members. You've kept us in the loop with our CIBs. We worked very well with planning throughout that process, very much improved, and I just want to give you kudos for that, because you've done an outstanding job. Now, Mr. Lehman, one of the things before I leave this beautiful council, one of the things my constituents really want to make sure happens that I do not see within your planning at a glance is working with THDA proactively to ensure communication on proposed LITHC properties, low-income tax credit properties in the future. Have there been meetings and have there been discussions with regard to that, so that we are not caught off guard going forward as the IT city in making sure that we are proactively placing those projects in opportunity areas throughout our city?
I have not personally had any meetings, but I don't know if Mr. Sloan had meetings prior to me taking over this role. I'd be glad to get with Adrian Harris and sort of talk about what next steps we could do to address what you're talking about. So that would be something that I would be glad to look at.
Thank you. And on the budget item for the special purpose fund with the Tennessee Department of Transportation grant, when you mentioned what that entails, is community meetings a part of the efforts with that grant to ensure that constituents within our areas and the council members are involved in having input in how we can appropriately reduce the number of cars? Because in Southeast and Nashville, Antioch, it's a huge issue. Now that we don't have our transit thing going, we got to start back over. We have got to figure out something, because too many people are sitting in traffic in the morning for 45 minutes to well over an hour, just in a short stretch. So does this grant cover community meetings?
I don't know if it does specifically, but the whole goal of the grant is to get the word out in any way possible, as much as possible. So I would not rule that out. I would imagine, and we're at the very beginning stages of this grant. I mean, I think it's only, we've been trying to hire staff to fill the positions, and now I think we just recently have had all those positions filled in the last couple of weeks. And so I think next steps are sort of working with TDOT on getting the framework in place and then moving forward. But I would think any way that we can get out to the public to communicate the issues is we will do that. So I think coming here, talking to the council and having community meetings is something that will be done over the course of this grant.
I think it would behoove you all to please include in your strategic plan with that new grant, since it's in the infancy stage and the beginning stages, to incorporate in being inclusive of community meetings, most especially with council members since they have the pulse of the concerns of people and how our constituents can proactively have input into that
I agree
and
with
into those goals. And in closing, again, please make it part of your goals within your department to proactively work with THDA and the communication in the future with council members so that there's not an adversarial relationship there between our county and the state, and so that there's clear communication beforehand, before a project takes shape. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Lady Johnson. Seeing no other council members seeking recognition, thank you so much, Mr. Lehman, and to the
Thank you.
department and all the planners within the planning department and the commissioners as well for serving this great city. Our last department that we will hear this evening is the Codes Administration. If you can go ahead and begin to make your way down.